Hello, this is my Aunt Kathleen, my mother's sister. We are filming from Woodside, New York at her home.
Hello.
How old were you when you met your spouse?
I was 23 when I met him, and I was 24 when we got married. I met him back in Ireland. I was living there since I was 19, and I met Cormac when I was 23, and within 8 months we got married.
Describe your courtship. Were problems evident during your courtship?
Well, my courtship was pretty quick. We met each other, as I said, late summer, and we were married by the next summer. So our courtship was very fast, very exciting. There was no problems evident right away. Actually, we were like very madly in love, looking forward to getting married. Everything was fresh. I was meeting his family, he met my family, and it was a very exciting time.
Why did you decide to get married?
Well, back in those days, in the 80s, it was common for people to get married young, first of all, and it was just a thing everyone was doing. All my friends, most of them married early 20s, and when we met each other, we really kind of knew within the first few weeks that we did want to get married. We were really like madly in love, and we met each other at the end of the summer, and by November, the day after Thanksgiving, Cormac asked me to get married. So I was all excited, and we decided to get married. And in those days, you didn't have to wait a year or two to book the place. We decided to get married the next summer, so we got married in August. And it was, we wanted to start a family, start our life together. We were very anxious to get going.
Describe your engagement.
As I said, my husband asked me to get married around November 29th, and we were living in Ireland, but we decided to come to New York to meet my family. My mother and father were living in New York at the time, and we came over here for Christmas, and my parents had a big engagement party, and got plenty of gifts and everything, and we went back to Ireland because my husband was living at that time with his parents. I had an apartment in the city in Cork. He was living with his parents. So at our engagement period, we decided like where we're going to live. We looked for a house. We didn't really get a house right away, but we got an apartment to live in, and started setting ourselves up to get married in the summer. Our engagement was a time of preparing for our marriage.
How old were you when you got married?
When I got married, I was 24. I was 23 when I got engaged, and I was 24 when I got married. But I felt I was very mature at that time. I was living on my own in another country since I was 19. I had gone to high school. I had gone to business school. I was working, as I said, in another country, living on my own. So 24, I felt I was fairly ready for marriage. And when I did tell my father, when I got engaged, I called my father, and he says, "Oh, it's about time." That's another thing I'll never forget. It was good times.
What were you looking for in a spouse?
I was looking for someone tall, dark, and handsome, first of all, but someone who was smart, who was well educated, who could support me, maybe not right away, but who had the ability to make me a home, have a good life, was able to drive, as I said, was smart enough to know what he wanted in life, and someone who was mature, who already had gone past like the teenage wild years, and someone I loved.
How does the reality of marriage compare to your expectations of what marriage would be?
Well, the expectations, or my expectations were, I think, realistically, I was hoping to have a marriage like my parents had. My parents were married 50 years. They were happily married. They had a beautiful home. They had 6 children. They had their hard times, but everything seemed perfect. When I got married, reality set in because my husband went back to school. went back to college, his first time going to university. And we had hard times because, first of all, we didn't have much money. I was working as a secretary. He was going to school, so it was one salary between us. And things were pretty hard because we had to pay our rent, we had to buy our own car, pay for everything ourselves. He had just moved out of his parents' house, and he was like in shock too because every night we had to come home after working hard all day, make dinner, go grocery shopping. At the same time, there was good times too because we had freedom. We went out every weekend to see our friends. We traveled a lot. We went to New York a few times. We went to England. So we spent a lot of time traveling before we had children.
How do children affect marriage?
Children, even though they're lovely, we all want children. It was hard in the beginning because at that time I had my first son 3 years after we got married because my husband was still a student in college. We didn't have any money. So when he came along, we had to change our lives again. My husband was still in school. He had another year left of school, and he really didn't have money coming in still. He wasn't able to work part-time, and I was doing all the work, so then we had to get a babysitter as well. We had to put my son to what was called a creche, a babysitter in those days. So besides just doing all our work all day long, we had to come home and take care of a baby. We had no parents to help us at the time. My mother and father were in America. His parents were not living near us. And so children were hard in the beginning, until the first few years, until we were settled into a house. We ended up coming back to New York, lived with my parents for a while, and so it turned out easier than after the first few years. After I had my second child, my mother was able to help us. I myself went back to college and became a nurse. And with two incomes coming in then, my husband was working, I was working, it was much easier. So the first few years with a new baby, 2 new babies in the end, it was quite hard.
How important are money in marriage, sex, similar values and or religion, cultural background, educational background, and age difference?
All right, that's a lot of questions. Let me see. Money in marriage, I think money is one of the very most important parts of marriage because without money, everything seems more difficult. It's better to be settled, to have an education, to have a possibility of a job at least, before really getting married. This is some of the things people should talk about probably before they get married. Sex is very important as well. Of course, that just comes naturally. When you're madly in love, sex is all part of it. You love each other. Similar values and a religion. I think similar values and or religion are important, but definitely I have seen people marry from different religions. My own sister-in-law married a different religion, someone from a different religion. I have cousins who married different religions as well. And it all works out. Most of the time it worked out. Similar values are important because, you know, if you love life, you love your family, you love each other, all that is very important, to have similar values. Our cultural background was a little different. I was an American, my husband was Irish, but I did have Irish background as well, so that is important but not as important. I think everybody can, if you meet someone who you really love, their cultural background is not that important. Educational background, I think, is very, very important because if one of you is a college graduate and the other person maybe never graduated high school, there's too much differences. It's very hard to talk to someone about anything. You might not have that much in common. Different pay rates, different pay scales, that might cause a lot of trouble. If the husband makes a lot less money maybe than the wife, or vice versa. If one person thinks they're doing all the work and the other person is just hanging back or maybe just staying at home, not working, I think that leads to a lot of stress in a marriage. And that has to do with the money in the marriage as well. If one person is not working or can't work or doesn't have the education to work, it leads to a lot of stress and a lot of problems in the marriage. Age differential, I think that doesn't matter that much either. If you really love each other, no matter what age, I don't think it matters. And the husband could be a lot older, the wife could be a lot older, but if you really love each other, I think age differential doesn't really matter that much.
What would you do differently if you could?
Well, I would have liked if I had been more settled and maybe more educated before I got married and had the possibility of getting a better job. When I was young, I was the oldest of 6 children. I went to high school, graduated from high school, then went to a year of business school. So I never really had the chance to go to college. As I said, I was the oldest of 6 children, and my father was not well. There was no chance of going to college and no money for going to college, so I ended up getting a job right away. And even though I was working, I never had extra money for the extras, so I wish I had gone to college when I was younger. And before getting married, that I was settled and they probably had maybe a house, maybe not a huge house, but I wish I was more settled, had a house and everything ready before I had children. That would have been the perfect life. But, things worked out pretty good. I don't think I would have changed anything else. Maybe just have waited one more year before I got married.
Would you or have you remarried?
No. I don't think I'll ever marry again. My husband was the love of my life. I don't think there's anybody who could match up with him, really. He was a really good guy. He was funny, just down to earth, very good father, good husband. So I don't think I could ever find someone who would love like that again.
What is the most difficult thing about being married?
To me, I think the most difficult thing about being married was probably for me money problems in the beginning. And we went through a lot of hard times, but I think marriage is like for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. We had hard times because first I got sick, as you remember, when you were younger. 9 years ago, I had cancer, and thank God I survived. And then my husband got sick, and unfortunately, he never really recovered. But we stayed together all the time. He took care of me, I took care of him, and we had some good times. The most problems, as I said, I think, we had a good family, we had good children, we had good parents and, brothers and sisters. But I think if we had been more prepared in the beginning and had more money, maybe were more settled, it would have been a lot easier when the kids came along.
What advice would you give to teenagers or couples having difficulties?
To try to work it out. If teenagers, I think for teenagers, this is the time in your life when you should try to experience everything you can, get a good education, hopefully get a good job, or plan for a good job, but get to know each other well, and experience life.